In case you're struggling on taxonomy, I took this short clip just to help alleviate any headaches that might be coming along with it. So the gist is taxonomy is a way of classifying life. So in this picture, you see we got a cow, we got a wolf, we got an elephant, we got an insect, we got a, looks like a heron, we have a chicken, we have a shark. Now all those things have something in common. They're part of a certain group, the animal kingdom. If we take a look at this tree, then that tree would be part of the plant kingdom. If we take a look at this is the shadow of a mushroom, which would belong to the fungi kingdom. So taxonomy is where all these labels come into play. We had all these different forms of life, so we had to figure out a way how to organize them into groups. So this is a picture of an axolotl, and you're going to see its scientific name here in a couple slides. That scientific name is going to tell us something about it. In this case, it's going to tell us where it's found. The gist is, in the 1750s, Carolus Linnaeus was a scientist who realized that we needed to be able to communicate to other scientists in other countries. So to make sure we had a universal language of communication, he developed a system called binomial nomenclature. So that would be the two most specific groups in a taxonomic pyramid, which we're about to see right here. So that pyramid starts out at the most general level. So this domain is called eukarya. This means that any organism in this broad group has eukaryotic cells. So they have a nucleus in each of their cells. Now, domain eukarya encompasses plants, fungi, and animals, among other organisms. And so to be more specific and figure out what type of animal we are talking about, we have to get into a more specific group. So that domain is broken up into several kingdoms. In this case, we're going to focus on the animal kingdom. So that kingdom is called Animalia. So what you're seeing here is the name of the level of of classification. So the domain, the kingdom, the phylum, those are all groups. And what we're seeing beneath them in the print, which I will highlight right here, is the name of a specific domain. So this specific kingdom would be named Animalia. Now the kingdom Animalia, or the animal kingdom, has several types of animals. We belong to a group within that kingdom, and that group is called a phylum, and the name of our phylum is called Chordata. That means we have a spinal cord that connects all our nerves to our spine and to our brain, and allows our brain to communicate and move our bodies. Well, there's a lot of different types of chordates. You could be dealing with certain types of fish. You could be dealing with amphibians. In this case, we got to figure out what type of chordates we're going to deal with. So we're going to deal with mammals. And so our class would be Mammalia, which means we are mammals. And there's many types of mammals. So we have to get even more specific. We want to talk about the mammals that eat meat. And that would be the order Carnivora. Well, there are many types of animals that eat meat, so we need to get even more specific and narrow it down to, let's say, the dog family. So this would be dogs, wolves, and foxes. Well, in this picture, we're looking at a red fox, so we're going to deal with the foxes within that family. Well, it turns out that if you want to deal with the fox group, or genus, which is the second most specific of all our taxonomic groups, or taxa, which is what they're called, we want to narrow it down to a group called Vulpes. That means that you're dealing with the fox family, basically. Now, there's different types of foxes. You could deal with an Arctic fox, the gray fox, the European red fox, the American red fox. Which type of fox do we want to deal with? Well, in this case, we want to deal with the American red fox. We're going to narrow it down to Vulpes vulpes, or the last two categories. These two categories at the bottom of the taxonomic pyramid are the most important because these make up a scientific name. So the genus and the species are like our abbreviated form of all these categories above it. To identify every living thing, we identify it by its genus and its species. If we're dealing with a person's name, your last name would be like the genus or the group to which you belong. And your first name would be that variety within that group or your species. So if we're dealing with my name and we want to identify me, well, there are many Beckers. So we're going to deal with the genus first, and we're going to write Becker. Now, when you write a scientific name, it's always in italics, and the genus is always first, and the first letter is capitalized. Now, there are many Beckers, so that could deal with my sisters, my brother, my dad, my mom, my cousins. We want to deal with Aaron. So we're going to write my specific variety within that group in all lowercase letters in italics after the genus. So we would write A-A-R-O-N. And so the group to which an organism belongs is going to come first, and that is the genus. And then the specific variety is going to come after it, and that is called the species. So here's some more examples of the genus and species of some organisms. Now notice what all these have in common. The genus I can pick out because it's the word that has the first letter capitalized. Hence, that is a genus, that is a genus, and that is a genus. Now, the whole name is written in italics. So which one would be the species if I've already identified the genus? Well, the species is never capitalized, and it's always second. So this is a species, this is a species, and this is a species. The axolotl that we saw, you can see the remnants of it in the background, but we saw it in the beginning, is found in Mexico, so its name is Ambystoma mexicanum. And so that tells you that it is found off the coast of Mexico. So scientific names can tell you about characteristics or where it's found, but they tell a story a little about the organism that you're trying to identify. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the taxonomy practice. Now what you see here is the key. So I'm going to go over some basic problems that people might struggle on. We're going to deal with 3 and 4 first. If you look at 3, now taxonomy deals with words in Latin. So if we find any words that end in "fida," then that tells you something about what that word means. So if we go back to our chart in the Taxonomy Notes, if we find "fida" in this chart, that tells us that we are looking in the plant kingdom, and this organism is in the plant phylum. So "fida" means you are looking at the phylum level of the plant kingdom. Okay? Now if we were to draw the entire taxonomic pyramid, kingdom would be right about here. And then we have phylum, class, order, family, and then genus and species would come next, respectively. So now we have to deal with another example. So let's say we see a word that ends in mycetes. So we find mycetes on our chart. Mycetes would tell us that we're looking at a fungi class. So if you see a word that ends in mycetes, you're dealing with a fungal class. If you see a word that ends in opsida, here, that tells you that you are dealing with a plant class. And so sometimes you'll see common endings in these words that tell you what level of classification you're dealing with. So here's the example of how you write the genus and species. The 3 rules are the genus comes first. and you always capitalize the genus. The next rule is that the species comes second, and species is always in all lowercase letters. The third rule is that you write the entire name in italics. So make sure that if you're looking at examples of names, you want the one in italics that has a capital first word, or the capital first letter of the first word, which would be the genus, and then the second word has no capital letters in it. That tells you you're looking at the correct format of a scientific name. So again, I have put an example using my name. So you want the less specific group first, which would be the genus, and then the most specific group second, which would be the species. Now remember, the genus isn't the least specific out of all the groups. We're dealing with the last two groups of a whole pyramid. And so between genus and species, genus is less specific than species. But together, those two groups are the most specific groups out of all of those other groups. And I have them numbered in order of specificity here. So species is the most specific, genus is the second most specific, then family would be third, then order would be 4, and then class would be 5, 6 would be phylum, and then the least specific in these groups shown would be kingdom. Now there's only one group that's even less specific than kingdom, and that would be domain. So you have all the groups in the taxonomic pyramid in order from the most specific group to the least specific group. And so what you can do with these names is you can, in all these groups, is you can use them to chart evolutionary relationships. So let's do an example. I want to find out how closely related a domestic cat and a bobcat are. So if I look at the common name, that's what we call these animals in English. Domestic cat's right here, and a bobcat's right there. Well, if we look at these two columns and compare them, they're in the same kingdom, the animal kingdom. They're in the same type of animals, which would be the phylum. They have spinal cords. They're also mammals. They eat meat. They're felines. They're in the Felis genus. The only difference between these two species is that level, which is the species. The domestic cat has a species called Domesticus. The bobcat has a species called Rufus. Because they're in two different groups at the very most specific level, they are very closely related. So what I mean is, the farther down you can go down the taxonomic pyramid without being in different groups, the more closely related you are. So let's do another example. Now let's compare the domestic cat to the ferret. So they're both animals, they're both chordates, they're both mammals, they eat meat. Here we have a difference. So we have one that's a feline and we have one that is not. So since they are in different families, that means they are less closely related than the domestic cat and the bobcat, because they went all the way down unto the species level before they became in different groups. Okay? So now I'll even do one more example. Let's do the ferret and the blue whale. They're animals, they're chordates, they're mammals. They are in different orders, which comes before family. So the least closely related would be the blue whale and the ferret side by side, because they diverged high up on the taxonomic pyramid. So the higher up you are, when you break into two different groups, the least closely related you are. The farther down you go on this pyramid, so if we can make it all the way down to genus or species, you are very closely related. And so what I have here is some examples of that I just covered. So if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, but I hope that helps.